today I'm going to draw this picture of a woman, and the model's name is Claire, so I'll reference that in probably the title and the other attendant documentation for this YouTube video. So yeah, we have this lovely picture of a woman's head and shoulders, and we'll just kind of get right into it here. So I've got the space on my page that I want this to occupy in mind, and I might block out or sort of make a little note to myself here of where the top of her head will be. And that way I know that I'm not going to run into issues later with running out of space. Similarly, I might, I might skip me leaving a bottom mark, because as long as I don't run out of space at the top of her head, I'm fine with whatever fades into the bottom. So, as long as her chin and neck are in the picture, whatever's happening past that is sort of, for this portrait anyway, it's kind of all supplementary. And so we'll just kind of start with, I'm going to start a little different than I would normally do, and just kind of block in this bit of hair here. And notice this curve here. I'm looking at sort of the curve of her bangs there. And then that leads into this curve on her eye ridge. So now we can start getting into the face a little bit. And again, this really light phase of blocking, and got that side of the face a little bit blocked in, and let's go for one of these eyes here. And it's a well done photograph, well lit, and focus is fantastic, and the angle is really good too for acting as a reference for drawing. Just interesting, and there is a lot to study there. And so let's block out this little spot here where we see the white of her eyes, or the reflection of the light in her eyes rather. And kind of, we can lightly put in a little bit of an eyebrow here. That'll wind up being covered over with her hair in a little while. And then we can start blocking in her nose. And really the main thing to keep in mind here is the angle that the nose is, the ridge of the nose is being compared to the vertical, like the vertical axis of the picture. And then the location of her, the tip of her nose, if you look at her eye, we see her eye, the end of her iris right here, and the nose is a little past that. It's somewhere in the middle of the white of her eye. Like if you look straight up and down on the picture, it's almost to it's not quite to the tip of her eye. So we'll put it somewhere right about here. And that should help you, that should help locate it's an important place to be close to correct, as correct as we can, with just, eyeballing it quickly and without resorting to tools and things like that. Now let's sort of start. Another thing I like about this photograph is that there is a nicely demarcated dark line between the upper lip and the lower lip. A lot of photographs that gets lost a little bit because of the way that the lighting is not working, and or the photographer is not really being mindful of it or whatever. But here we see it, and it's really nice. It's very helpful for drawing, and I think it's also pleasant to view. And so the bottom lip is just a little thicker than the top lip. And there's a slight smile here. And the corner of her lips, we can kind of adjust this if we need to as we go. But it'll be easier to make that adjustment once we block in her other eye. So let's do that. I'm looking at this sort of diagonal axis here. It's a line that we can imagine it connecting between the tip of her eye here and the tip of her eye here. And extending that down a little bit will get us in the right axis. And maybe there's a slight curve to the line too. It's not just a straight line, but it's got a very, very slight curve to it. So just kind of imagine that as you go, and that'll help you place this tear duct here on her left eye, the eye that we see on the right of the picture. And this eye also begins a little past where her nostril meets her cheek, and before her smile, the lips stop at the corner of her mouth here. So somewhere about here, and we can use this angle here and there, and we can start to block it in like that. And then you can use the same axis to sort of kind of just imaginarily swooping down here to find that top of her eye. I hope I didn't go into too much explanation, but I don't want to short you on the details, especially if you're newer to drawing, and these little ways of locating the positions of eyes and nose and things like that can have a huge impact on the aesthetic, the overall look of your work. So you can basically block it in like that. And we can come back and worry about some of the details, or concern ourselves with some of the details in a little bit. Similarly, you can follow this swooping kind of arc shape that we were talking about, and work on her eyebrow. She's got part of her eyebrows raised, so there is this little angle, which I definitely want to retain, get that right. It adds a lot to the expression. I don't even know if expressivity is a word, but if it is, hooray. If not, 1,000 apologies. So let's kind of block that eyebrow in a little bit, and still using a very light touch. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how the face is going along, so we'll keep on going with that. Maybe block in this, or, outline this area here where we know it's going to stay white. And let's get to some of the features here. So another great thing about this photograph is Claire has brown hair, and the hair makes life a lot easier for us as we're drawing, especially for people who are new and maybe aren't proceeding with the kind of confidence that somebody who's been drawing for a long time is going to have when they just jump in. Like this area here on her cheek, we want this space between her lip and the edge of her cheek to be the right shape, the accurate to the picture and what we see. So it's pretty slender, as you can see. And fortunately, the brown hair gives us some latitude to move that in a little bit if it's too far out. So the little things like that enable us to make little corrections if need be. Not saying that you'll need those corrections, but certainly it is nice thing for learning how to draw and for drawing and having some latitude, not always having to be on a high wire all the time. So then let's slowly, gently just block in this angle from her cheek there. And now let's start, maybe we'll look at this place that her neck begins here. And I'm just doing a vertical line up and seeing that it kind of starts right where her nostril. So it's just still the same process that we've been covering in all my other videos of, making sure that all the points relate to each other correctly, and that will get you in the door. So, okay, let's look at the hair. Very well photographed and fun to draw hair in this one because it's kind of loose and there are angles and shapes and stuff, but it's not too much. Like sometimes the hair in a picture can just be a little bit too much. This does not have that problem. And again here, same thing on her cheek and chin. If you need to pull in the form of the face a little bit, the hair enables you to do that. But for the most part, what we just want to do is block in the main shapes of the hair. And then she's got this kind of swooping thing here and this curve here. These are the main curves that we see. And, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to, capture every single hair or anything like that. But just drawing the shapes in and then getting the directional component to feel right. So then, these bangs here kind of swoop like that a little bit, and her hair here is angled like this. So just, once you've got the main block in, just like there's this shape kind of, and all the hair in that shape's generally headed in that direction. And then there's this shape here, and all the ones in that one are kind of headed in that direction. And there's this shape on top here. This is just an easy way to draw hair that I think it'll look really good and, vibrant, but it's not going to take, 3 hours to draw every single hair and get all the little shimmering highlights on each strand of hair absolutely accurate to the photo. So her neckline's here. Her hair keeps going up this way. And she's kind of leaning up against a wall, so we could retain that or whatever. Just the tousled look will stay in the picture, and I'm not going to worry too much about the wall. I think it makes for a really nice photograph, but we are focusing on the portrait here, so I don't want to put too much time into the wall and that stuff. So let's see here. I can correct some of this hair already, and like, you know, about the shadow. Look at where the shadow starts, and so my hair's mostly in the right place. I might have to bring it in a little bit, but there's a pretty dark shadow here. So, moving along, kind of start darkening in some of the details, and we've kind of got things almost all the way blocked. Maybe let's look at some of the shoulder area and collarbone. And so we see this crease in her neck, this line. I don't know if crease is the right word, but because she's turning and looking toward us, and we've got this shadow created by the sort of shadow of her clavicle or whatever. And then this strap of the garment here and shoulder here, garment there. And then it's lighter up here as we look toward her shoulder blade. And that can come down like that. And you see this space here, kind of want that to be accurate, so kind of just eyeballing that space. And we'll block in her shoulder and arm here, and then leading down into this line where her shoulder blade meets her arm. And I'm just going to do some quick shading here, and just looking quickly at the general shapes of the shadows here. We've got a darker one here and a darker one here, but in general the back arm is just, you know, a few steps darker than the rest. There's also some perspective going too, so it's getting smaller as it gets farther away, and don't want to linger on the shoulders for too long, but I definitely don't want them to just, you know, have no detail, so just kind of give them a little bit of shadowing there. Okay, so now that we've got most of this thing blocked in, we can go in about darkening up the darks and getting to the real shading part of things. So, you know, now begins this process that we talked about before of you know, seeking out those places that need to be darker and you know, darkening them up. And so I think definitely one of those places that I'm looking at first is this area by her eyes. Her skin, you know, none of it's going to be flat white, so we definitely want to make make some texture and skin tone, and just drawing what we see in the photograph. And there's a little bit of slight shadowing, and we can get to the freckles, I think, at the end and treat them as sort of features that we add in as highlights, kind of. Or and so we're getting to the stage where I'm going to try to describe and narrate my process a little bit as we go. But it's easy for me to just sort of blank out a little bit and just focus on the work here. But we see, like, the ridge of her nose does have a little more value than the edge here. And let's see. Also seeing that I need to bring up her eye a little bit there. And let's go ahead and do some work on the eyelashes. And get some of the shading done on the irises. She's got a little bit of a border on her irises, but not super dark or anything like that. But it is a little bit darker than the rest of her iris. So as lightly as I can, I'm just putting a little bit of graphite on the whites of her eyes. They're pretty bright, but they're not as bright as the gleam in her eye there. So that'll be the brightest spot in the picture. And it's a subtle photograph, so it's easy, the tendency to overdo it is a little bit strong. But just kind of resist that temptation, and by going lightly, your drawing will progress in a sort of gentle and subtle way, rather than having these like really intense so yeah, so just, I don't know, especially when we're talking about the gradations of value on the skin tone, just keeping it subtle, keeping it similar to what we see, rather than, sometimes a tendency can be to see lines where there aren't really lines, or see shadows or details where there aren't really shadows or details because of whatever reason. but just keeping the photograph in front of us and keeping, the goal being to just draw what we see. That's, I think, the mentality that's, helpful to getting a beautiful picture that looks true to life. And the pupils are dark, even a little bit darker than the eyelashes, but the eyelashes are dark. And I think depending on how large your drawing is, it can be useful for this picture to treat them as one thing. But if your picture is very large and you can handle the detail, you might include some of the sort of the delineation and the differentiation in some of these eyelashes here. I don't even know if that'll pick up on the camera, but like on this eye, I think it would probably be wise to just treat them as one thing. Bottom eyelashes almost can just be treated as like highlight details at the end or something. Like they're so fine and they are noticeable, but they're not, I wouldn't want to draw too much attention to them. Okay, so I'll kind of, in the interest of speeding it up a little bit, get some of this hair done. Get the hair did. And then we'll be kind of entering the home stretch. Maybe I spoke a little too soon. We'll get a little more skin tone to do here. But we'll treat this relatively quickly. And the main thing I wanted to do was block the picture out and start the process. And then, where you take it from there is just up to you. It's a kind of teach a man to fish kind of philosophy, or teach a person to fish. Anyone can do this. It's just sort of having a methodology that they can use to build the project, and not necessarily the idea that you should just sit here and copy through everything I'm doing, but just the idea that, by using this process, sort of, you can get whatever picture you want onto the paper for yourself. And my lips here are getting a little lost in the skin tone. And same with the bottom lips. There's a little bit of a shadow there. And maybe some curvature there that okay, so Let's see some of these features here. A little darker here, and a little darker there too. Darker there. Eyebrows, and we'll finish up some of this hair and some of the details in a little bit. But let's go back to here where we were with the nose. There's this almost imperceptible little bit of extra value right here where her kind of from her cheek and her smile and stuff. But it's there, so we want to see if we can get it onto the page. And now that we've done that, I can see that this shadow needs to come in a little bit more. And then there's this little contour to the shadow too. And it is quite dark here, and that's definitely a credit to the photographers. Sense of lighting. And I'll include as much information as I can and to credit the photographer as well, so that anyone who's interested can look into that a little more. So we see that there's this like highlight kind of that is on this plane of her nose. So I'm just going to kind of outline that very lightly, then draw the shadow that I see in her cheek, again very lightly, almost just dragging the brush kind of stuff, or dragging the pencil, not really pushing out at all. And let's see here. The smiles, she's got a little bit of sort of creases here and there from the smiling expression. And the nose is a little more, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Sophisticated than I had it in my picture, so I want to kind of fix that up a little bit. And we're getting into that phase where things might look a little weird until we start finishing up the details. this section here, some of the hair is darker, some of the hair is way darker, some of the hair is not quite as dark, but it's all in that spectrum of pretty dark compared to everything else. So let's see if we can nail down some of these final planes here. This relatively like highlighting area, almost this highlight. These planes of the face that are facing the light source in this studio are sometimes tough because you know, they're very light, and graphite is gray. So let's see. So first of all, I'm just going to start wrapping in the values from this side. And this lightest section we'll build into it. This, I don't want to block it in too darkly yet, or too dark, but this part of her face is going to be critical to getting the expression to look right. And okay, so how do I want to, just thinking about what angle I want to put this at. So like this part here could go like that, and then maybe this part here could go like this. And then we'll go in for the rest of the shading there. So now that we've got pretty much the whole thing, like the shading kind of established, now we can start finishing up the details and stuff. This part can be pretty fun because I like to keep it pretty fast and lets you just be a little more expressive. But what we're doing here is just looking for areas that are too where the contrast isn't high enough. Like on the photograph, there's a lot of contrast, but it's very subtle, and it's in lots of different colors. And since we're only working in the one color, and we've got a grayscale, it's sometimes the contrast can kind of get a little too boring or muted, or so there are places like the tip of her nose that is relatively high contrast to the area behind it, even though the area behind it is almost the exact same color. And that's sort of like the subtlety and quality of the lighting and the quality of the, the skin tone and the model and stuff like that. So similarly, like this area here, the outer rim of her iris, needs some darkening. And on this side, the outer rim is not as dark, but it's not, a shadowy part of the face. So let's sharpen up some of these eyebrows a little bit here. And again here, this eye is much lighter, closer to the light source and facing it and all that. But there's still this high contrast area on the edge of the iris there. And then the eyelashes come down here. There's a super fine line in the space above her eyelid. And let's kind of get some of the, in the tear ducts too, there's some relatively fine lines, but you don't have to, how much you want to devote to those is really up to you and just the look that you're going for. And I think they'll help with the just staying true to the photograph. And they're one of those things with eyes that people don't spend a lot of time looking at, but if they're not correctly done, like they can stand out to people as weird, and we don't want that. We don't want anything like pulling focus and telling the viewer to analyze it for why it's not correct. We just want everything to just sort of fly under the viewer's radar and let them just admire how everything looks proper. And the lips, I think I've made mine a little dark, but I think it's going to be all right. Let's get some of the, so her hair is sort of tucked behind her ear, something over here, and it's creating this nice dark shape for us to work with. And then this spot on her cheek, can darken that up a little bit as well. And the hair here is layered too, so some of the strokes that I'm doing, I'm hitting with the sort of broad flat shading side of my pencil, and some that I'm doing with a sharper edge, and in the hopes of getting this layered, textured look, not having everything be flat. I suppose it's a little like cooking. Sometimes drawing there's kind of a recipe, but you don't have to follow it exactly all the time. Sometimes there are little different elements to the ingredients, or the little stoves can be a little different, so cooking times vary and things like that. So just being sensitive to the differences as you go. Sometimes just different sheets of paper within the same pad can be different and require different, amounts of shading here and there. And this one's been a little bit of a journey. I wasn't sure that I was going to get it to the place I wanted it to be. And it's kind of happening for me here, but the kind of accentuate the hair a little bit there. And again, with hair, definitely not going to break out a magnifying glass and try to copy it exactly. It's too fun to just get the impressions and the contours, and I'm sketching in the contours on the shape here, and then I can come back. Let's see here, we've got this sharper stuff going on here. And on the outer edge of the hair, it's much darker, so you can almost just get in there and cross-hatch a little bit. And however you want to approach that, I would definitely recommend doing some cross-hatching on this outer edge because it is so dark, and to get that darkness in the paper, you're going to need to go at different angles. And let's see. So yeah, so pretty soon we'll get to a place where we can take a quick step back and see if it needs any major changes or alterations, and definitely don't want to forget about the freckles. So this video might run a tad long, but for anybody who is interested, the whole thing will be there, and you won't have to bounce between bits. I suppose maybe I could find a place in the middle and do it in 2 parts as well. Maybe I'll do that. But if I do, I won't edit out any of my process. I'm trying to sniffle less while I'm on camera. I'm no professional narrator, but I do want, I am cognizant of wanting my voice to sound good to somebody who's listening to it, maybe on the television at home or something like that. And let's get some of these finer hairs in here too. So I like her hair. It's like really cool in this picture because there are like these parts here, it's super fine hairs. And then there are also like these bigger shapes as well. So, there's like this almost this Vesica Pisces shape shadow here, and this darkness here still isn't quite dark enough on my picture. So I'm going to push in pretty hard there and make that darker. And then there are these like kind of V shapes and lightning bolt looking shapes, and well, maybe not lightning bolt looking shapes, but like sound wave shapes, or the shape of a heartbeat on a catheter monitor, so whatever those things are called. So just different depths in the darkness there make for a very fun model for a portrait. And let's see here, got some, maybe a little shadow under the nose that I could amp up a little bit to get that looking a little more accurate. And let's see, eyes, bringing that in there. Let's get some of these similarly, these like upside down V's and arrow shapes and stuff. Sometimes they look like, I don't know. Oh, you can decide what they look like, but they'll go a long way to creating that texture of hair without having to get lost in the details. Or and let's do some of these details too, since we've got them in the picture. I think an easy way to treat this fabric, like there's like a pattern on it, just kind of, adding that pattern to the fabric can help with that. There's a little shadow under it there. So let's see, a couple more things before we get to the freckles and stuff like that. So let's start with some of the freckles here. I'm using the soft side of my pencil, and I'm just going to lightly add some of the freckles by just almost just pressing and squiggling just very quickly. The freckles like on her nose, they're visible, but they get lost like almost immediately when the light hits them. So it's, you can just give the hint of them kind of without pushing down too much. And what I'm doing is like, I'm not like being super accurate. Like I'm not like lining up each freckle like I would if I was going to like put an eyeball on a face or something. But, what I'm doing is saying, oh, in this general area, like right here, maybe there's like a bigger, darker freckle. And then on her cheeks, there's like a little smattering of freckles here. But kind of just getting a sense of the general shape and value of them, like if you were looking at them from super far away or something. But I'm not going in there and counting the freckles and making sure that I've got them all exactly accurate to the photograph. That would be a really cool project for somebody who is doing, like a very photorealistic picture of this person. And it would also be incredibly to do it exactly accurate could take a lot of perseverance, but I'm not trying to sell the quicker and easier method here, but I'm also like I'm happy with how these freckles are going. Actually, I think that they look really good, and she has, like, the model has freckles, so I want to make sure that like I'm staying true to being as real as I can be about my source material. And one thing too I'm like liking about these freckles is if you notice like on the edges where it's darker, you can see them a little more. But man, they just scram when the light really hits them on that direct plane. And they must exist. I don't know. Maybe I can't tell from the photograph. They might exist there. I don't know if they're just not there, but I think they are, and that the light just washes them out. It's really cool. It's a really cool effect. And right now what I'm doing is I'm just sharpening up this line there. Maybe kind of get a little extra intonation in here and here, just a little making it more like the photograph, getting that variation in there. Maybe getting this a little bit darker. And the shadow in the nostril is so slight, it's almost not even there, so it's a tough one. Let's see. I mean, I could, like, there's freckles on her shoulder here for the sake of having like this continuity of texture and for the sake of realism. Might just get some of those in there. But then you see how like the tilt shift or the focus on the camera, very quickly her collarbone goes out of focus, and I think that's another really nice element of this photograph is that her face is perfectly in focus and her shoulder here is perfectly in focus, but like immediately her collarbone starts fading out of focus fast, and like her back shoulder isn't really in focus. And it's nice because it makes it so that aside from the lighting accentuating the features of the face, the focus is pulling all the extraneous pieces away. So it's a doubling effect, like a multiplier effect of how much focus the face is getting, which is good. So I mean, it's a good photograph, and that's partially what drew me to it. Was I saw it, I was like, I want to draw that photograph. And the photographer and the model were kind enough to allow me to. I asked for permission. And so I'm going to post the model's name in the notes, maybe the full name in the title of the video. And I'll post the photographer, the link to the website, as well as name of the photographer. That way, people who are interested in maybe exploring or purchasing, I don't know, her services or her photographs. I haven't looked at her too much, but I do intend to go to the website and check it out. But yeah, I want to definitely make sure I give a proper photo credit, and I don't know if this model's done, like, what other work you might find her in, but I'm pretty sure she's a professional model. I think she is, but I'm not digging into it that far. I'm just And then definitely don't want to leave any of these areas here flat white. We've been over that. Like this part of the white of the eye has to get darker for it to look natural. So we see some freckles in here too. I think the freckles have been one of the most unexpectedly fun parts of this picture. So now I'm just using like this sort of soft edge of my pencil to do these super small circles to even out some of the tones here and there. Get some of the straightness of the lines away. And to just subtly shape the form where I see it as needing it. There are definitely little places that I feel like could use it. So areas like this, see where the background hair is darker and the foreground hair is a little lighter, more chestnut brown color. I find it's useful to like go upwards from the dark spot rather than downwards from the bright spot. Don't know if that's well explained or not. I hope so. The main thing is just making sure that the textures are there and the various degrees of sharpness and broadness are there. And I might have to wind up breaking this video into 2 pieces because it's probably running pretty long, maybe even 3. But if I do that, and you're still here with me by the 3rd video, hurrah, you rule. And I hope that you are enjoying drawing with me and that you will like and subscribe, and that you will check out some of my other videos. And my ultimate hope is that they find people who are in the process of learning or refining their drawing technique, or maybe the process of first discovering their technique, or maybe the process of rediscovering their technique, and that is useful to them to build up a style that is uniquely personal to them, and as well as rewarding artistically. I think that drawing is just the most direct and expressive media that we have as artists, and it's the building block of so many other artistic endeavors and creative works. And I know that drawing the human face is one of the most interesting things to draw. There's just so much to look at, and there's so many elements to see. They're also, it can be difficult for people who are new, and that's one of the reasons that I'm going to spend so much time drawing faces, is that I'm hoping, I don't know where different people are going to find value in what I'm doing, but I'm hoping that by doing a lot of it, that, they might find it in a place I didn't necessarily expect them to, or anything like that. But I don't know, it's just hard to know, what's going to be helpful to somebody. So kind of just putting it out there, and hopefully it's all helpful at some level. But in some ways, I think certain particular aspects may be particularly helpful to some people rather than others. And let's give her a little more. She's got more eyelash than this. And then she's got some eyelashes on the bottom too. It's almost like applying makeup at that point. I don't apply a ton of makeup, but the makeup I have applied, that's what it's like. I don't always apply makeup, but when I do, it's just like drawing eyelashes. All right. Attempts at humor aside, I think we're getting to the end of the portrait drawing here. This might go lightly over this area here under her cheek. And this highlight, it's kind of important to keep that in the right place, and then have it be the right shape. But I don't necessarily want it to be just a flat set of lines there. So I can kind of darken it up a little bit through here. the part of her cheeks that are a little rosier, kind of hit those with a little more shading, and they, converting them into black and white, they would be places with more value because they have a reddish, pinkish tint to them, which tends to dominate in those, in a black and white color scheme. Oh, it's tempting to just put in way too many freckles. They're pretty fun to draw. But just keeping it, keeping the source material in mind and just kind of keeping it representative of that. I'm going to bring this line in even more here by her lips. And I'm getting there. So yeah, I think, we'll call this picture done here. Just if I can put it down. It's too fun. What do we see here? So yeah, I just keep seeing little areas that I want to touch up a little bit, but that can kind of happen at the end of any picture that you've been working on for a little while, and finding that stopping point can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. We'll get there. And maybe put on a few more. Now that's looking good. All right. Thanks for being with me, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Ezekiel Dasho, and I hope to see you next time.